great to be here. Really, really pleased that Liz has invited us in today to talk about this topic, the art of meaningful conversations. My name is John Rice. I'm Director of Boland Solutions. I thought just worth probably a moment to just talk about Boland and who we are, the work that we do, to provide a little bit of background and context to what's to follow. We've been established 14, just coming up 15 years now, just in this whole area of performance management, most notably around performance appraisals and 360-degree feedback. And it is to try and ensure that people get the most of these practices and implement them in a fairly robust way. And so to that end, we offer a full service kind of across that, from process consultancy and redesign of forms and processes and the like, through to the online software that sits at the heart of the processes, and then out to the back end of the processes, whereby the conversation has to go well. If it's a line manager, it's having those performance management conversations go well, which is obviously going to be something we'll lead into today. And debriefing, which is one of those types of conversations that's more centered around 360 feedback and how you share and debrief someone around that feedback. So we have that kind of sort of broad split between the software and service. And you can see there a nice diverse range of clients that take us across professional services and financial services, not-for-profit, and the like. So let's come into
John,
today's session.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt again. Can I just mute everyone? We've got a bit of interference there, so just bear me a second.
Okay.
There you go.
Hopefully that's working. I could see there was a few people asking me to speak up, so I've now put my phone to my head now, so hopefully I can talk a bit more sort of radio style. So big picture then. So broadly, these are some of the questions that we'd like to answer today, and also to offer up the Meaningful Conversations framework and introduce you to that as an approach to performance management conversations. Of course, our starting point then is what is performance management and why is it important, and we'll touch on that in a moment. Then we'll introduce the framework itself, which comes off the back of understanding that about performance management. And then what is the mindset and what are the core communication skills that underpin this framework, this model? And that becomes a starting point for actually to make this framework or model useful, either for yourself or within your organization. And then just a little interactive exercise as well, just to consider and reflect personally and individually where you are in this model, and maybe start to think about some changes you could make in your approach. Or if you're in that HR L&D role, think about that in terms of the organization and culturally where it may find itself, and maybe what changes you could make to culturally shift the organization into one whereby meaningful conversations are happening more readily. So let's step back for a moment and consider, why do we have performance management? We took a lead from some research that was published by the CIPD in the last couple of years, and I think it's an ongoing piece of research actually. I think there's different phases to this that's coming through, entitled Sustainable Organizational Performance, and they were seeking to establish what really made the difference, specifically trying to establish what made some organizations succeed with longevity over time and those that didn't. And what they found is that a large part of that success came down to levels of employee engagement. And that in turn was being underpinned by the quality of the relationships and the communication between line managers and direct reports. And they noted obviously that if that communication was poor, if individuals didn't feel efforts were recognized and being called out, and that connection with their line manager wasn't happening, that was having a negative impact on engagement and hence in turn on performance for the organization. What we recognize again, and CIPD sort of have studied around this, is that performance management is really the main vehicle by which managers communicate what's required from employees. It allows them to set out with clarity the expectations on what people should be looking to achieve and how they should develop and perform, etc., and give them feedback along the way so they can track against that, etc. And so performance management, if it wasn't taking place, that lack of communication and clarity would create would have a demotivating effect amongst employees. And noted there that you could say that those meetings, those performance management conversations and meetings do provide the best opportunity for managers to lay out that clarity, to provide that feedback, and critically to have two-way conversations and transparent relationships with people. And that's quite key, I think, in terms of then as we come into meaningful conversations. So we start to see almost like an ecosystem emerge, that idea that sort of everything is very intricately woven together and it all has a part to play. And if you look to the top of this kind of very simple funnel, we were saying, look, so there's something about these very day in, day out conversations that one is having, cyclical, annual and the like, and more regular in some instances, of setting objectives, giving feedback, coaching and appraisals, all of which were fundamentally the necessary conversations in a robust performance management process or practice. And that performance management then, that was the main vehicle of communication for line managers. And we know that the line manager communication and relationships were key to employee engagement. And that in turn was bringing about that sustained performance for the organisation. So we kind of saw that ecosystem emerge. And it gave us the abilities to start to build on that as a theme as we worked our way towards sort of thinking about meaningful conversations. So we're going with the idea that performance management, by definition, then is this, by our definition, to say, look, it is a vehicle of communication, and in that regard is just a series of two-way conversations. So it's really just to strip things away and demystify things in many regards and say, look, it is just a series of cyclical conversations. But they all have a very defined purpose, whether it's setting goals at the outset of the year or giving feedback throughout the year continuously, or having that annual review to look back. They all have a defined purpose. So the starting point is to be absolutely clear what the purpose of those conversations are. So we laid these out. Again, I suspect if we did have an exercise, and sometimes we do as we're talking through this with groups, to say, look, what do you think the purpose is of these different conversations? Much of this would emerge, and I suspect the same will be here. But for us, we have working definitions there to say, look, goal setting is all about clarity. It's about clarity and setting out those expectations of activity and performance. Feedback is very neutrally trying to describe the gap or the difference between then the desired performance as set out by those goals or objectives that have been mutually agreed and the actual performance, which of course could sit above the desired performance or sit below. But a feedback conversation is just trying to very clearly describe that gap. Coaching then is often the conversation that then helps someone think about how they might bridge the gap. The coaching is about helping someone see their situation more clearly so that they can then sort of think about how they might resolve it, improve their performance, make better decisions, and giving them some responsibility to do so. You then get to that annual review, sometimes much maligned, the annual performance review, and many things in the press talking about the death of performance reviews and the like. But that is, we kind of argue that's baby out with the bathwater, I think, that the review as part of this series of two-way conversations has a fantastic opportunity for people to reflect and learn. And so we see that as a key purpose, reflection and learning. And then the last one, the behavioural feedback debrief, being drawn in much more now as a trend into performance appraisals or reviews, the idea of bringing in behavioural feedback from other people. And so you have this rich feedback from people. And in that instance, as you talk through that with an individual, the purpose is to raise their self-awareness about the feedback and have it as a very much a developmental conversation. So very much all with a key purpose in mind. And that then takes us to then the beginnings of a working definition for us of a meaningful conversation. We'll see that a meaningful conversation is one which delivers against those stated purposes. If it is there to give feedback, it delivers that feedback with absolute clarity. The objectives are understood so the person walking away knows how to, knows what the next steps are and knows what it is they're seeking to achieve with absolute clarity. But of course we recognise that that's not enough. That is one key dimension that you have to deliver on the purpose. But the other key dimension is then how it happens. And of course that goes to the very heart of the fact that there is a relationship at play between you and your employees. And so this is the kind of the what and the how. What needs to be delivered and how you go about it. And we say it's about the relationship. It's about building and preserving trust in the relationship. And we're using trust really as a shorthand indicator, if you will, for the quality of the relationship that exists between yourself and the other individual. High trust means a high quality relationship, a good relationship, and low trust, by contrast, will be one where the relationship is eroding or taking a hit or is diminished in some way through the conversation. So they are the two dimensions. So that's what a meaningful conversation is in our mind. And of course, with those two dimensions, it allowed us to very simply create a very simple framework, a 4-box model, and to lay those dimensions out onto those two axes. So you can see there the purpose running across the x-axis and the trust running along the y-axis. And we can see then different styles or types of conversations emerge. So, for example, if we take the top right-hand corner, which is always the nirvana state, the golden state, the one we're aiming for, we're attending to both dimensions. We are having conversations that deliver with absolute clarity the purpose of the conversation. The feedback is given with absolute clarity. The objectives are set with absolute clarity, etc. And we're doing it in a way which is building that relationship, which is building the trust between us and the other individual. So we're doing it in a high trust way. And so that's one type of conversation. By contrast, we can come to then the one directly below that, the bottom right-hand quadrant. And you can see there then we're delivering on the purpose of the conversation, but less attention is being given to the relationship. Less attention is going to the relationship and the trust therein between us and the other person. So in those types of conversations, they come away, perhaps the individual, with absolute clarity as to what they're doing wrong, for example. The gap's been very clearly described as between desired and actual performance, but perhaps handled in a way where the individual goes out of that feeling somewhat done to, someone feeling somewhat, certainly they don't come away with any warmth of feeling in how that message is being delivered, for example. So very much there's clarity, but nothing to improve the relationship. By contrast, if you come across then to the top left-hand corner, of course, we have the trust, the relationship being held up and attended to. So great conversation. It's a classic Tom's a lovely guy, great conversation, not a clue what to do next. So we have that idea whereby the relationship is very well attended to, but there's a lack of clarity to the conversation. Certainly the purpose is not delivered upon. And of course then in the very sort of bottom left-hand corner is that very dark place, which is where neither is attended to. There's nothing given over to try and build or preserve the relationship, and neither is there anything given by way of a useful outcome from that conversation. So we kind of sort of lay that up, and maybe here, Liz, is where we'd offer up into that chat box maybe just to invite people maybe to share their thoughts on this. So just coming through this model very quickly, we gave labels to each of these types of conversations, and I'll share our labels in a moment. But I thought it'd be interesting first exercise just to invite people to say, what do we think maybe a label for that golden state, the nirvana state of both clear purpose and high trust? Maybe invite people just to write in some of their comments as to what do you think we might term that type of conversation in that upper right-hand corner. Is that okay to use the chat box, Liz? I know we're going to move to a different layout in a minute, but just for a moment, just before I unveil our labels and work up the model in a little bit more detail, just invite people to just throw a few suggested titles in there. Constructive from Sarah, that's great. And again, you'd expect that certainly to be a characteristic of one of those conversations. Utopia, love it. Yeah, I might change the model actually, Gabrielle.
You're after my heart, Gabrielle.
Fantastic, yes. Circle of trust, there we go. Let's meet the parents. I like that one as well, Nish. There's certainly something. So trust certainly is one of those, something that's playing that. On the bus, Gabrielle, yeah, certainly there'll be something where both parties are certainly engaged in the process and the conversation. Positive, clear management from Charmin. Yeah, some good stuff coming out. I know there's some more typing. I like Utopia, but this is not the pink area. And coming through then, let's just keep going with that. Of course, then let's come down for a moment then into the bottom right-hand corner. How about a conversation where we've absolutely delivered on the purpose of the conversation, but we've gone about it in a way which hasn't built the trust, which is maybe where the relationship has taken a hit? What might we term that type of conversation? Again, just be interested in some of the labels that you might use. Blaming, Jenny, yeah, certainly again. Directive, command and control. Yeah, very much so. Again, the nature of some of these conversations, some of the characteristics you're starting to bring through. Stressful. Yeah, Courtney, I think, again, that could be one of the feelings that people sort of experience as they come out of it. Autocratic. Yeah. Disengaged, again, could be something coming out there. Pot and kettle, interesting one as well. And I think this is it, just demotivating again, one of those things of a feeling perhaps in those conversations and leaving it. And we're going to play with that in a moment in a little bit more detail. Let's just come through then. How about the, and talk too much, listen less. Thank you, Alana. The upper left-hand corner, high trust, unclear purpose. Again, start to take me into that one there. So it's a lovely warm bath of a conversation, but there really is something not quite hitting home there. Manager who wants to be friends, over friendly, do what you like, cozy, chat, great. Again, you're starting to get to the very essence of the labels that we started to offer up to populate this model. Ineffective, certainly a potential outcome. Okay, and go with the last one then, that very dark place there where neither is happening. What do you want to give that as a label? Unconstructive, yeah. Yeah, I think you can start to get something that's unclear. Again, down in that apathetic, yeah, Courtney, again, I think you are getting a lack of care is often happening. Time wasting, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. A meaningless waste of time. Doing 9 to 5, which is a kind of tick box type thing, I think, as well, Nish, that may be coming through. Well, look, just it's all great stuff. And again, so I suspect any of those labels we could just as easily have used. We went with these. Meaningful, not unsurprisingly, as in the title of the framework, Meaningful Conversations. That's it. For us, that's the meaningful conversation. Both dimensions attended to. We went with coercive as that bottom right, which kind of captures, I think, much of what you said, that autocratic, quite directive nature of it. Absolute clarity of purpose, but somewhat one agenda being served. Your purpose may be being served, but certainly maybe not the other person's. So they can feel quite pushed in a direction or things passed down to them. And you kind of pretty much capture that top left-hand corner there, friendly chat. That sense of it being quite informal, not really hitting the target or the purpose of the conversation, but perfectly nice in that regard. And didn't take us too long to work out the label for the bottom left-hand corner there. If we were meaningful in the top right, we were meaningless in the bottom left. Fantastic, great. What I'd like to do is just explore that in a little bit more detail, and the way I'm going to do that is just to change the layout for a moment. So you should see the chat box hold, but what I've done is just to replicate that framework now with the labels that you've just seen me offer up. And now I just want a free-for-all now. Really what I'd say is the way I'd like you to populate this with a few more details of around this framework is to say, I want you to recall these conversations yourself. This is a close your eyes moment where you might kind of go, okay, either as a line manager or employee, but start to capture what characterized these different conversations. What did you see? What behaviors did you observe? What language was being used? What did you feel in the conversation? And what did you feel as a result of the conversation? So, if you can start to maybe just reflect on these conversations in your life, in your world, and critically, what are the behaviours being seen? So again, I'll start to pick stuff out in no particular order, but I can see there in the meaningful one, we're getting engaged, motivated, valued, open and honest, so more clear instructions, great. Listening, Lucy, absolute key. Again, you're observing that happening. Encouraging, open questioning, great. Let's come over to friendly chat, lack of clarity. We know there's going to be something about being rambling. Great one there, Benjamin. I think I had something similar myself, and that waffle, fluff, vague. The lack of structure there points to the fact we're at that end of the purpose axis there. No deadlines. Yep, there's no sort of compelling actions off the back of that. Let's come down through to coercive, bullied, harassed, demotivated, victimized. And again, some of the behaviours in there that were bringing those feelings about. Good to try and just note what specifically is being seen. So for Sarah, for example, I've just pulled back up there, so bullied. And again, is there something that would characterise that bullying? Would it be just talking over someone perhaps, or forcing them to your point of view? So just keep going with those. I'll come back up into meaningful again, because that's our desired kind of end goal here. Started by referring to specific observations. Yeah, so there's a real focus to it. I think that's right. Two-way listening as well. Yeah. Reviews of performance, clear purpose, plan of actions coming out of it. Empowered, so some sense presumably of just devolving that responsibility for people to take charge of this. Future focus, Charmian, that's a really interesting one. I think we often see that as being any looking back on performance and the like should be as a means to an end, which is to sort of, help people think about what they're going to do going forward. So yeah, I'd agree there. Involved, I think this is it. Meaningful is getting that real sense of it being two-way, two adults coming together, having a grown-up conversation. Great, keep coming down. Coercive, I'll run down some of these. Some great stuff coming through again. And hopefully you're seeing this build as well. You're seeing people sort of kind of coming to a similar kind of idea around this. So interrupting, yep, overbearing, great word, Ella. That is that sense of leaning over someone and passing this down. And to Elaine's point, dictatorial. Negativity, one-way process, definitely getting the one-way thing. Passive-aggressive, I think that's a nice one, Shireen, and I think that could be one of the things where very much that could be observed as someone just sits back and thinks, well, there's no point in me saying anything, I might as well just sit there and take it. I'm quite reticent and kind of sort of sitting away, disengaged from it. Lack of care and empathy, certainly. Low trust is that lack of empathy, I think, that you could see in those conversations. Let's catch meaningless, which I know is no place for us to want to hang about too long, but you're catching, obviously, the worst of every world there. But yeah, pointless, not engaging, lack of appreciation. Yeah, it was a lack of care. Serves no one's purpose, which is interesting. Yeah, neither the organisation nor the individuals themselves in that conversation. Probing, attack. Yeah, great. I think you can often see these ones typified by anxiousness, irritation, tension, and they can become quite toxic over time. Messy, great, yeah. Where do I fit in the organisation? Being mean, yeah. I think it can be where the unprofessional, yeah, and I pick up on those last 2 points. It can be where it can overspill. It can overspill from being professional and thinking objectively about what needs to be discussed to being quite personal. I think those attacks can take quite a personal stance. Great, and just really interesting. And again, of course, it's really interesting because the model starts to become useful as you really flesh this out, as you really start to become attuned to what these conversations look like, what they sound like, and the feelings in these conversations, both in them and as a result of them. It's the first starting point, I think, to be able to maybe affect some change, either in ourselves or in our organisations, if you see a particular one playing out more readily than others. Again, and I can see some stuff fell into the chat box as well, so great, but really, really great. So hopefully you're getting a real sense of this. And The next part then is to say, and you don't need to offer this up, but it is something to start to go, look, how might this model be useful to you, is to ask, where do you find yourself most often in this model? So as you look to this build out now and flesh out with all these behaviours and the language used and the feelings within these types of conversation, where do you find yourself? Now you don't have to necessarily declare that in here. If you want to, that's fine. If you want to say, look, I kind of see myself down here in the friendly chat too often than not, then feel free. But almost again, personal reflection, just where are you finding yourself most often? It may be obviously that you have some fantastic conversations with people and some of those are very meaningful, but you might want to pick on a particular example that you maybe want to try and tackle, but where are you finding yourself in the model? If you're considering your organisation again, which I know some of you are as HR&D professionals, again, then culturally, what do you observe happening? Are there some of these conversations that you say are culturally dominating in your organisation and happening more often than not? And again, it's just to place your organisation then in this model. We'll often see as we go into different organisations that we work with that a particular style of conversation does play out quite strongly. You might get friendly chat as being the organisation where conflict is avoided and people tiptoe and elephants are left in the room, etc. And so friendly chats tends to be the predominant style of conversation that happens. Or coercive, time-pressured environments where people are being pushed into having quick, fast, just do it type conversations and find themselves as a business being pushed into those more coercive ones where things are passed down, dictate to people. Jenny's got, I'll just pick up on Jenny's just to catch someone who shared there as an employee coerced in my organisation. I believe more managers have friendly chats or coercive conversations, yeah. And I think we do get drawn across those. Limited, I can see there is a meaningless conversation. Tips how to manage this, welcome, yes. And again, we'll come into this, Jenny, I think, because I think there's something about, look, recognising these types of conversations is step one. Placing yourself in the model then is step two, because once you're attuned to these, I think the opportunity for change is more likely. So we've got some line managers having friendly chats. Yeah, okay. The next question then is to say, just holding that as you're thinking perhaps individually of where you are in this model. Why? What's keeping you there? What is holding you in a friendly chat? Maybe what's holding your organisation in those kind of friendly chats? What's missing? What's keeping you or your organisation in those types of conversations? Try to catch some of the comments coming through. Increasingly hard to find time reinforces the need to make time to prepare for one-to-ones. Yes, time becomes one of those things I think that can take people away from their ability to have a meaningful conversation. I think we'd recognise again as adults that a meaningful conversation comes about through preparation and time. To do these well needs care and attention. Jenny, don't want to lose the trust and good relationship. Fear, yeah, very much so. That can keep them there in the friendly chats, the tiptoe, the eggshells, they can fear of breaking. Lack of skills and no training. Again, to your point, Jenny, yes, I think that's very much what this is about, is trying to give line managers an underpinning framework that helps build their confidence and capabilities, and using this as a framework for them to start to think about the conversations they're having.
John, let me just mute the line. Sorry, John, to interrupt.
Sorry.
Can I just mute the line because there's quite a bit of interference happening now. So whilst people are typing,
Okay.
just bear with me a second, okay?
Yeah, no problems.
There we go.
Are we back there?
We're back now, yeah.
So I'll just pick up some of these in the boxes as well, because there's some great stuff coming through. So unprofessional, want to socialise a lot, more interested in the friendship group, absolutely. Elaine, pushes boundaries offline management. Elspeth might want to, if you've got any sort of thing that might qualify that better, please feel free to put that in. Coming across to meaningful, appreciated, encouragement. Managers to see an investment in staff. I'll hold to that point in a moment, Diane, because I think that's a really useful one. I think that starts to give us a sense of how can we make it more likely we can have meaningful conversations. And there's something in what you said, I think, which will lead us into the next part of the session. Just coming back, coercive, time poor managers, ticking boxes. Yep, that's that pressure. And unkind attitude, coming into meaningless, lack of hope, chance to envisage a career path. Yeah, though I think that sometimes people are being kept in that because they don't see a way through. Yeah, I think that's it. Fantastic. Great for that you've really jumped into that, I think. So the last question then, and again, this can be just for that kind of reflection again, is if you're finding yourself then in one of those particular conversations, friendly chat, coercive, or even meaningless, but particularly the friendly chat and coercive, what could you do to make it more likely you can have a meaningful conversation next time? And it might be, again, just for you to just reflect in this moment, just to consider. If you are more in the friendly chat, what is the one thing actually may push you more towards meaningful? Maybe it's something around the way you prepare. Maybe something it's in the structure you have in the conversation. What is it that could make you pull you along that purpose axis a little more? Similarly, if you're down there in coercive, if there is that thing there, of course, what's happening there is less attention being given to the relationship, to the trust. So what is it you could do that would make it more likely you can come up that trust axis? What could you do? Perhaps it's as simple as sitting back and listening more, refusing to fill the gap, asking the questions. Some coming through in the general chat here, so I'll just pick up on some of these before we move on. So Jenny, plan and prepare thoroughly. I think that's absolutely key. Having an objective of the meeting, prepare for how we'll feel, what the employee may feel. There's a lot about that. I think there's a lot about just going in with that sense of being prepared for what might come through the conversation. Courtney, your one thing there about managers don't see staff as the most valuable asset within the organisation. I think that's a key thing again, which we'll come to, is about what's being seen here. Start with the end in mind. Action points, great. Lots there about the purpose. Just on that point about coercive, though, if you were in the coercive, what could you do that might sort of just bring up the trust? What could you do to actually move you from coercive to meaningful? Firm but kind in words. Yeah, I think there's something about the tone and pitch that you could bring to the messaging, to the conversation. Listen, ask open questions. Yeah, Sarah. Invite views, invite. Lovely. Lovely, that idea of just drawing in the other person. It's a two-way dialogue. Yeah, absolutely. Take time to listen and learn about them. Diane, yeah, that's great. There's something about understanding them brings about that trust as people feel they're being listened to. Great. I'm going to move on now just to sort of lead us into the final part of the session today. So how do we go about this? How can we make it more likely we can have meaningful conversations? I think a starting point is somewhat in what I'm about to share with you now, which is to say, I'm just going to do an exercise now. Let's see if I can get this right. Bear with me. I have done this before. I'm going to see if this works. So what I'm going to say is I'm just going to share something. If you've seen this exercise before, please keep it to yourself if you know the answer. And just hold back. If you feel once I've posed the question that you do know the answer, again, don't give the answer, but just ping in the chat box to say, I've got it. I can see it. Okay. So let's see if this works. Here we go. So here we go. I think that works. Is that working, Liz?
It is working.
This is seat of pants moment.
You do never so well.
So, just a quick question then. Can you add just one line to this and make it equal 6? If you think you know the answer, please keep it to yourself. If you've seen it before, please keep it to yourself. When you do think you have an answer, just ping in the chat box there. Just say, got it, see it, yep. Something positive to say you've got it. Got it, Lucy's got it, there's great. There we go, got it, Sarah. Thick and fast now. I won't ask whether you've seen this before, whether you have come to an answer just in this moment, but I'll give it another 10 seconds and then I will stop. Got it. Fantastic.
Got it.
Great. Think I've got it. Samantha there, much more tentative. I like that.
Maybe.
Maybe. There we go. I'm gonna give out the answer now. So think so. Great. So here's the answer coming. I'm guessing. Here we go. Is that now again? You might sort of say yes. That's what I saw. If you're just a few people, is that what you'd come to? So just let me know that just when that comes through, and then I'll. Yep, there we go. Fantastic. Okay, great.
Really
Some
obvious
great
to
lateral,
do it, isn't it?
great lateral thinkers out there. But look, hey, look. The point of this wasn't so much that whether you were good lateral thinkers. It was to lead us into what I think is a key thing that underpins our ability to have meaningful conversations, and it's this. I think what happens in this exercise is, as I unveiled this, no doubt you all saw, I'm guessing for the most part, Roman numerals, would be fair to say. A lot of you would have seen Roman numerals. And of course, what happens is that belief or assumption that we're seeing Roman numerals was leading us to do certain mental gymnastics. We started to think, okay, well, Roman numerals, that's a 9, so a 6 is a V and an I, so, and away we go. We start to turn it upside down and add a line and cut it through the middle. And as a result of that, we got a certain result. And around we went. And we had this see, do, get. We were starting to believe it to be one thing. We did certain things and got a certain result, which for the most part was unsatisfactory. It was only when we started to believe or assume it could be something else that we were able to do something different and get a different result. In this instance, the right one. And I think that leads us into the model again, that the starting point for meaningful conversations is the beliefs and assumptions you're taking into that conversation. And so we offer up these liberating beliefs to say, look, go into a conversation holding that person in positive regard. People want to do a good job. They've all got their own frame of reference. They have a worldview that may be different to yours. They have choice. They have decisions that they make based on the options they see, again, different to yours. And they're capable of change. And it's a basic coaching tenet as well, that they have the resources, they have the abilities to make changes, improve, and make better decisions. If you hold that that person's shirking their responsibility, has a poor attitude to work, etc., you'll go in, that will dictate the way you go into that conversation. So if we want to get meaningful conversations, we know what we have to do because you fleshed out the model earlier with all those wonderful behaviors that you need to do. I need to make it two-way and they need to listen and they need to ask questions. But you have to start with what you believe and assume. So if you believe that that person is capable of change, it's very likely that you'll go into that conversation different. You will invite their views, you will ask them what their thoughts are, and you will draw them in more readily into that conversation. Now, for sake of time, of course, we have to skip fairly quickly through this as a model. Liz, I'm conscious of time. Is that far enough?
Lovely.
Shall I wrap up very quickly with the last?
I think we've got a couple of minutes left now. So, do you want to wrap up?
So here we go. So the starting point is beliefs and assumptions. So be careful of those. Check them at the door. We then want to go up the y-axis. We want to build trust, and you pretty much nailed it in the way when we populated that model. Seek to understand them, display empathy, build that rapport, listen, ask great questions. Again, there's a whole day on that. And then, of course, on the x-axis, deliver on the purpose of the conversation. How? Be very clear. Understand what that conversation needs to achieve. Then prepare thoroughly, which I think you all captured. And then follow a process, follow a structure whereby you get to that desired outcome. Very often that process is driven by some great questions that just invite that person to think about their performance, think about the feedback, consider what they might do differently. And your role as line managers becomes very much about asking great questions. That'll get you to the end goal. Liz, I'll probably then hand back to you.
That was fabulous, John. Thank you for that. I'm going to put a poll up there whilst I sort of just finish off. That was brilliant. John, whilst I sort of go through to the next slide, do you want to just talk about what some of these webinars are, because I think that was absolutely fantastic. I'm sure everybody will agree with me. And we've just got a quick poll up there. You can answer as many points as you want, but just sort of taking this to the next level, really, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, I think as you can see there, those last two slides were just to say, look, how do we build trust? And I think there's opportunities to talk about that in more detail. That often comes about, as you might imagine, the core skills that we would go through in a meaningful conversations training with people, is to sort of say, how do you display empathy? What does great questioning look like? What does empathic listening look like? And then the purpose of the conversations, absolutely. We would in those kind of sessions look to say, look, what is a good way to prepare and what is a good process to follow to set great objectives, to have a feedback conversation? How do you describe the difference in a way that gives clarity to that individual? How do you reflect and learn? How do you ask questions that help that individual in that way? So really those other webinars look at the x-axis pretty much. They look at how to deliver on the purposes of those different performance management conversations.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I think everyone's probably just finished. That's brilliant, John. Thank you for that. Sorry, I can't bring up the poll and the slides all at the same time, so that's really quite annoying. But thank you, everybody. I thought that was an absolutely fabulous session, John. It just got everybody thinking there, and there's some really good, everyone sort of come out with it. I'm going to try and work on a way to get that information transcribed so that you can all see the sort of the words and everything that everybody populated as well, to bring that forward to everybody when I send the slides out. I think that's something we can maybe work on, isn't it, John? So we can sort of give people the real-time results from this event rather than just the box standards sort of, without the boxes filled in, really. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you very, very much. It's a shame we have to finish it, really. I was getting really, really quite involved in that.
I felt slightly rushed towards the end, so I apologise
sorry about
for that. Suffice to say, if they would like to hear more about this and delve into it, I'm very open for them to contact me and explore it further.
Brilliant. And I've just put thank you. I've just put a link up there where you can leave John some feedback as well. So please feel free to do that. We'd love to know what your thoughts are. And I have to race off, unfortunately, but we do have next week the 3-tier employment system with Michael Millwood and Making Better Decisions as the neuroscience breakfast club that we've got there with Jan Hill. So please join us then. And if you do have any questions, as John said, or I will give you John's details direct in the email that I send out after this event. But I'm talking very, very fast now. And everyone's typing. I'm keen that we do finish on time for these events. So thank you, everybody, ever so much. And thank you, John, for everything as well.
Thanks, Liz.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks to everybody there. I appreciate all the feedback and comments as well. It's very nice. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. I'll end the meeting now. Thank you.